Hello everyone and welcome to the new episode of the Darktable. In this episode I would like to answer some questions and show you some interesting things about usage of drone masks. So let's get started. First question comes from Shaman Bear 2, who wants to know how to add some color tone to the black and white photo. For that I will use this photo that we already edited in one of the episodes about black and white conversion. For that purpose we will use another instance of color balance RGB and bring it above color calibration, which have been used for black and white conversion. And now we have in color balance RGB we have a 4-way tab, which is quite useful to add some kind of color tonality to your photo. And for example, if you want to have something like sepia, I will suggest to use only those 3 sliders, because you can influence different areas with different colors. And for that purpose I will start with shadows. I will give the shadows some reddish look, something like that, and then give to the midtones, which is here the power function here, some other color, let's say something orangey. And now we have nice transitions between those 2 colors, or nice mix. We can also use highlights, in highlights some yellowish, but not too much. And as you can see, we have already a quite nice sepia tone, but we can improve it even more with mask section, masks tab. And in that section we can influence how steep are those transitions between those 3 areas. For example, if I want to have a higher influence on the shadows, or a steeper transition, I can go with shadows fell off and go up. You can see in the mask how the shadows are influenced. Now it's quite soft transition between shadows and mid-gray. And if I go to the right, I have a harsher transitions, steeper. So that's one option. And also in the mid-gray, transition between highlights and shadows and mid-grays can be influenced in this area. Let's turn that indicator off and show you what's going on with the photo itself. As you can see now, if I go to the right, I have more influence of on the shadow, from the color of the shadow, and to the left we have more influence from midtones and also from highlights. You can also use that threshold in white fulcrum, and you have even more color influence. And now we have something like that. Maybe I will go there, add some steepness here. I don't know. I don't think we need to influence too much the highlights, so let's leave it there. So you can play with that. You can play with different colors. For example, we can have something like dual tone. I can add in the shadows, for example, some colder color and warmer in midtones or in highlights. Well, maybe leave it at the yellow. And also play with the masks here to see what kind of look we want to have, something like that. And you can also influence colored photos. You don't need to have a completely black and white photo. You can desaturate your color photo to some extent and combine those original colors with those colors from the 4-way tab. To demonstrate that, I will use this photo from the last episode. And for that purpose, I will also add a new instance of the color balance RGB, because I don't want to mess with the original settings, because I would like to have just another version, and if I made a mistake I can go back really quickly. Okay, now with the next instance I can now desaturate with global chroma, desaturate that photo and add some colorization in 4-ways tab. For example, I don't know, I can use some orangey or maybe reddish look to the shadows, then give some, maybe some greenish bluish tone on the midtones and some yellowish on the highlights, and I can mix them now with the masks and white fulcrum, go up and down and see maybe steeper in the shadows, let's say something like that. And as you can see, you have already a quite different mood of the photo, and you can go back to the master and play also with saturation a little bit. For example, I want to add the original colors back to see how it looks together, mixed together, and you can see now we have one nice mood, some kind of color grading, which can be interesting. Okay, I hope I answered your question. If not, be free to ask what wasn't understandable in the comment section. The second question comes from Tamas Pap, and he wants to know the logic behind my usage of simple tone curve with tone equalizer. So to be able to explain that, I will use this example and we'll start editing and explain that on the way. Okay. So in this photo I would like only to add a little bit contrast in the midtones and highlights, and therefore I will use tone equalizer only and adjust the mask, go to the advanced tab and add some brightness there. I will also use color balance RGB to improve saturation a little bit, whatever. And we are practically done with the contrast. But look what is happening. I'll go a little bit near. If I now turn that preservation of details off, we are getting even more local contrast. We don't have only global contrast now, but also we have also enhanced the local contrast in this area. Okay, before with, this is now with preservation of details, and this is without. What preservation of details does, it preserves those details that you already have. But if you disable preservation of details with simple tone curve and add contrast globally, you're also enhancing that local contrast. So that's a nice option which can be used to improve the local contrast. Look what's happening now if I do quite opposite. So let's disable it. I will add a little bit exposure. Well, let's say I want to remove that contrast globally. And now I will use preservation of details for that first. Let's say I want to have something like that. And I will go also near. And look what is going on when I disable that preservation of details. Now we are losing that local contrasts. So that means if I removing contrast globally with simple tone curve, I'm also losing that contrast in the details. That's practically also the main reason why we are losing our local contrast by higher compression in filmic. So to address that, let's try something else. Let's assume I want to see even more details in the shadows to brighten the whole photo. And I can do that with exposure, and now I can see every detail, but through the compression and the highlights I have lost a lot of details in those trees, because we can see we have almost 3 EVs of our camera compressed in only 1 EV of the dynamic range of the display. So we have lost those contrasts there. Now, to be able to get back those local contrasts, I need to move those trees from the high compression area here in the highlights into mid-gray, somewhere here, down there, and I will get those contrasts back. So we will use now tone equalizer for that. I will enable preservation of details now. So I will go down with our brightness in this area, and now I have my highlights in the mid-tones, in the mid-gray area, which means only with that step I have recovered practically my local contrast there, because I moved those highlights from the high compression area in the highlights in the mid-gray area. That's the first step. Now I have a little bit of room here. I can use the next instance, and this time I will use simple tone curve. Let's adjust the mask quick. And now I can add a contrast only in that highest highlights, so to say. And now I'm getting even more contrast in that area. So, I mean local contrast, excuse me. If I adjust the saturation, you can see we have a lot of contrast there now. So what is going on there? So let me try to show you. So let's say we have filmic here. With those EVs, the same like this one. Now, with compression, our highlights, our trees are there. They are quite tight in the brightness. We don't have any much brightness. Now, the first step was to use tone equalizer with preservation of details and bring that in the mid-gray area. Let's say this is mid-gray. So we have them there now, and they are now much brighter because they are not more compressed, because they are not in the high compression area now. So we have that details back. And now with the next step, we will add that brightness only on that brightest part of the highlights, so that we have them spread a bit more, and through that we have even more local contrast, because we have used for that a simple tone curve, which also enhances not only contrast globally but also the local contrast. So that's the point of the recovery of the details. So the very important thing is to know that if you want to have, if you have one photo which has quite high dynamic range, you know that you will lose those details in the highlights. by compression. But now you can use two instances of tone equalizer to bring that highlights back and enhance that contrast. As a first instance, to bring those with preservation of details, to bring those details back in the mid-gray, and then enhance those details by adding a contrast only in the highlights with simple tone curve, which also adds local contrast if you're adding global contrast globally. And that's the main reason why I sometimes use two instances and sometimes only one. In this case, let's remove that again. In this case, I don't need to go too far with exposure because I don't need to see any details in the shadows, so I only need to enhance that highlights area, so I can immediately start with a simple tone curve because I know I will add also the local contrast on that area, which will be enhanced in the brightness. And now I can use only, I can use only color balance as last step. Let's see, something like that. And I already improved my photo quite a lot. So in this case, I don't need to go too far with the brightness, only in the highlights. And in most of cases, I have enough room so that I can use only simple tone curve if I want to enhance some brightness in highlights. But if I have a high dynamic range photo, I need to use two instances of tone equalizer. One for bringing those highlights in the mid-tones, in the mid-gray area, and the second to enhance those local contrasts with simple tone curve. Okay, I hope I have answered your question now. And before we are continuing with editing, I would like to say a few words about one interesting comment from Thomas Papp about the fact that lately I'm using only a few modules for aesthetical part of editing. That's quite interesting because indeed, since Darktable introduced that scene referred workflow, I don't need too much modules for that, and I see Darktable today as some kind of, let's say, some analogy stereo system that you have if you want to have a nice sound at home. For example, let me bring that down. You have some amplifier deck, let's say that's amplifier for your stereo system. Then you have some equalizer, something like that. And Darktable had a similar logic for me. You have for brightness and luminosity, you have exposure as, let's say, as amplifier, and you have tone equalizer with which you can influence those brightness locally as some kind of equalizer. It also has a name, tone equalizer. And also for colors, it's quite similar. So you have something like amplifier. That will be color calibration module. And you have also some kind of equalizer. That is color balance RGB for influencing the colors locally. So you have for colors you have base options to adjust your colors, white balance, because you're influencing not only white balance but also colors and brightness, because you only influencing three main channels, color channels, and then you have advanced option with color balance RGB to influence the colors even more. So you have practically two separated areas, one for, let's say, for brightness or luminosity, and one for the colors. And at the top of that you have some kind of, let's say, multiband compressor or limiter, which helps you, or that is filmic, which helps you to have your loudness tight, so that you don't get your loudspeaker, you don't crash your loudspeakers. And so you have those three main areas, and for each of those areas you have one base adjustments and one adjustment for fine details, and on top of that compressor. So you can stack those decks as you wish, combine them as you wish, and use also masks and blend modes to improve that even more. So you don't need too much. You only need how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I will say 5 main modules and some additional like diffuse and sharpen and so on. And that's enough. And for me, that's a nice improvement and nice way to be able to understand how to use a Darktable. Okay, so let's start editing something else. Now I would like to draw your attention to some small details when you consider to use drone masks, which are not new but can enhance your masking ability a lot. So I will use this photo for that, and first I would like to improve that a little bit. So I will add some exposure, maybe not too much, and also improve the filmic. We don't need too much contrast there, and also we can compress a little bit the shadows. And now I can also use, as usual, color balance RGB to improve it even more. Let's say something like that. And now the main subject is here, that monument here, and I would like to pop it up a little bit more from the background. So I would like to mask it, and therefore I will use exposure module, new instance, and now I will start to use drone mask about that object. So let's draw the mask around. We don't need to be too precise, we can improve that mask later. Now the first thing is, we have always the problem that we can move that mask, what we don't want. To be able to fix that, you need to go to press the control button and that mask icon, and now we cannot move the mask itself but only the parts of the mask. And now we can also go around. We have fixed practically that mask on that area. And now we will see how the mask looks like first. And as you can see, what I have done, I didn't go with the path directly to the edge of that object that I want to mask, but inside. And also the feathering is outside of the object, so that edge of the feathering is outside of the object. And we will use now that feathering options here to improve that mask. And if you have that edge in between, the algorithm will try to find practically that edge. So we can use feathering radius and also mask contrast to improve that even better. But as you can see, we have also some issues. We need to improve that also. So we can now go to each of those nodes and improve that feathering. And what you have when you click on one node, you have also some drag point, and with that drag point you can increase or decrease the stiffness of the curve on that area and also the direction of that node. So we can use that to improve our curvature of the path. That's the first thing. And second thing, we also have one point there on the feathering curve, and we can improve that feathering for each node. We can increase that feathering or decrease it to our liking, and in this case I would like, for example, for this node to tighten it a bit, maybe also for this one, because we have here more area that we need. So we can go down there and maybe improve that overall contrast. So we will go to each of those points and improve the line there. So I can move this one like that and bring those feathering a little bit tighter, maybe even here, and so on. So I will improve it only on the areas that need to be improved. This area is okay, so maybe here, let's say there. Oh, excuse me. So let's see how this area looks like. Something like that. Just a tiny bit less of feathering in some areas. And you can see the internal mask will be automatically improved on those areas. So that's sometimes not easy to catch that node outside. But now we are done. As you can see, maybe let's try a little bit better here. Don't want to have too much grass, but only that object. So let's go up. Okay. So you can play a little bit more with those drag points and nodes. And I will say we have enough good mask now. We have improved that quite a lot. And then we can add a brightness there. And as you can see, we have quite nice enhancement there. And that fits quite nice on the background so that we don't see any difference. We can see, if you don't know that you have used that mask here, you would not recognize that. So it fits quite nicely in the background. Maybe as last step, we'll add a little bit more brightness there, something like that, a little bit more contrast. And you can see we are done without the mask and with the mask. Now our monument pops up quite nicely. So let's see before and after. Let's go to the color calibration, take a snapshot, go to the last step, and you can see we have improved our photo quite nicely. So let's see what we can do with the next one. In our last edit, I would like to demonstrate one nice improvement, enhancement of brush drawing mask made by Pascal Aubry, one of the maintainer and developer of the Darktable. And that will be a part of the next version of the Darktable. I'm using here a development version, so I can test it now. So let's start with exposure. A bit improvement of filmic, removing that high contrast and compression of the shadows, and of course color balance RGB as always for saturation, and also adding a little bit more contrast. Maybe I can use always also a highlights gain and power function to improve that contrast even more. Now the point is, I would like to brighten that road even more. Now I can use another exposure module, and we will now use that improved brush tool. So you can see you have inner circle and outer circle, and with mouse wheel you can enhance that radius. For example, if you want only the radius of an inner circle, you can press Shift key and mouse wheel, and you can then regulate that. Now, when we want to draw with the brush, we can only draw now, but I don't want to do that way. I would like to be more precise, so I will use another option. So I will draw the point here and then pull another point from that one down. So let's go a bit further away, let's say there. And now I can add additional points by pressing Control key, and we can also use that drag points to adjust the stiffness of the curve around that point, like that, and also direction of that node. So I will say something like that here. And now I can draw another one. Also adjust that stiffness and direction there. One more for there. Maybe just tiny bit correction on for the last one. I think I will go outside. I don't think we need to adjust much more here. So, and like in the last edit, I will also fix that path with Control and clicking on that icon here, so that the path doesn't move. And one interesting thing what you can do now is to adjust that radius of feathering. So let's turn the indicator on. Now when we are going inside and move that mouse wheel, we can increase or decrease that radius, but I don't want to decrease it overall. Now we have nice possibility to increase each point alone. So let me adjust the mask first. There with feathering radius and with mask contrast. And now if I go with the mouse on that particular point and move my mouse wheel up and down, I can regulate that radius of that feathering. So let's do that now for each of these points. And that's quite nice improvement, because you can adjust your mask now quite precise. That's really, really nice. So good job on that one. So look at that. Okay, the last one. Let's go outside. Wow, that's cool. Now, the one issue is what I have with this is the problem is when we have these circles and those diagonal lines there, it's hard to find that drag point that we had before. So I think the question is, do we really need that diagonal line and those circles? It will be maybe better to have it on the circle only, but without that mid part, that diagonal line. And also when we have that circle only on that node which is actually active, so that we don't have too much information here. Okay, but that being said, let's improve our mask even more. And also the last one. Okay, let's see. That's quite nice, as you can see. I must say it was quite nice improvement. So let's disable the mask and bam. Unbelievable. So let's see before and after. Let's go to color calibration and take a snapshot. Go to the last step. Look at that. So, quite nice improvement. Thank you a lot for that. And that is end of this episode. If you have some questions, please ask in the comment section or by pixel.us. And we will see us in the next one.